Tom Tugendhat.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's somewhat depressing to be speaking after this budget, which has basically picked the pocket of anybody who's trying to earn any money in this country, and has really sent a very clear message to everybody in our country, which sadly is one that many people are hearing, which is that this government is not on your side. This government will do everything it can to make sure that it keeps you in the place where you are, and this government will encourage you to leave the country rather than to invest in it. And I'm afraid we can see that in the numbers. There's 26 billion in extra taxes. There's 800,000 people paying more. And all of this is a welfare not work budget. Sadly, though, it's not just about those numbers. It's not just about those bald figures. It's actually also about what it does to so many citizens in our country. One of the most tragic bits of this budget is not just the £7.5 billion extra tax on those young people who've gone out and got themselves a university degree, which is hidden nicely and quietly in the OBR report, but actually the 1 million young people who will not end up in work. Because let's just think about that, Madam Deputy Speaker. 1 million young people who won't end up in work today, for another year, for another year. What does that actually mean? That means 1 million young people who in a few years' time won't have a choice because businesses won't hire them. They won't have a choice because the world will not be one that they're adapted to. And worse than that, they will have become, quite literally, slaves of the state, waiting for the man in Whitehall or the woman in Whitehall to decide what they get each month, each year. They will have become totally dependent, and that is a crime, to leave our fellow citizens dependent on the state. Forgive me, I'm going to make a little progress. The reality is, though, that that isn't all of it. That isn't all of it, because actually what this budget also did was look very hard at today. Very hard at fixing, admittedly, the Chancellor's and the Prime Minister's very real political problems today, but also look very hard at how do they simply inflate the balloon today, but nothing about tomorrow. Now, you can see this by the way in which the farmers are being taxed, in a way that is deliberately punishing investment. You can see this by the way that, despite the Honourable Member for Sefton Central claiming that there's been investment in this country, just simply look at the investment figures. The investment figures in the UK per capita see a 4% increase. OK, it's an increase. 22% in Canada, 79% in the United States. This isn't real growth. This is not serious investment. And sadly, we're seeing the reality of it feed through. And we're seeing the reality of it feed through because we are seeing the knock-on effects. Now, we heard the Honourable Member, one of the committee chairs, the Birmingham member who spoke earlier, talking about the fact that there's investment in start-ups. Well, I wish there was. I wish there was serious investment in start-ups. But actually, all of the decisions made by this government have convinced anybody who has got any entrepreneurial spirit to either go to Abu Dhabi, where there's some new version of Auf Wiedersehen Pet being filmed of British workers who've fled, or to go to the United States, which at least has capital to invest in start-ups. And all that we're seeing is a continuation of the Blair-Brown model of increasing nationalisation of savings, that creeping control that we've seen spreading over pensions, over the insurance market, that has left our savings 60% in bonds and only about 40% in equities. Now, that contrasts remarkably with Australia, Canada and the United States, who are 20% in bonds and 80% in equities. And I will give way.
Voted me, but the member said when he was backing Liz Truss to be leader of the Tory party, I have no doubt that we will move with determination to make this country safe and more secure. Doesn't that rather undermine his claim for any credibility?
No, I'll tell the Honourable Member an honest truth on that. She was wrong. I made a mistake. The reality is that's what happened. Now, here's the difference. What she did, it's true, put pressure on the economy. What this Chancellor has done is increased debt levels to the highest ever and the cost of borrowing to the highest in the G7. There is no debate about that, so I'm not going to give way on that. Let me just keep going on this, because the reality is what we're looking at the moment is we're looking at the politics of today and forgetting about tomorrow. We're seeing people being left on welfare and not helped into work. We're seeing pretense at kindness but long-term cruelty, because we're failing to recognise that it isn't the state, it's not the government, it's not the civil servant, and it's certainly not the minister who employs or creates any work. It's free individuals freely associating, freely structuring their lives in order to create opportunity for themselves, their family and their community. But guess what? This government doesn't believe in it, which is why we're now seeing tax levels at their highest ever, 38%, the highest since the Second World War. This is a remarkable theft of liberty from the British people. Forget about the digital ID, which is insane in its own right. But this is genuine theft of the liberty of free citizens to choose what to do with their resources. And that is an appalling decision. What we need to do is we need to look very hard at what the choices are. Because actually, we already see where this cost is going. Despite the Home Office estimates a few years ago that asylum seekers would cost £4.5 billion, this OBR tells us it's going to be £15.3 billion. That's a multiple of over 3. We're seeing any number of different areas where these costs are rising. And all this would be bad enough. All this would be bad enough. It would be bad enough in a normal situation where actually the reality was a bit of adjustment and you can get back to normal. But the truth is this isn't a normal situation. This is a situation that demands some frank honesty. And let me just lay it on the line. The honesty is the demographics of this country are going against us. We do not have enough young people for an ageing population. That means, I'm afraid, we do need to look at the triple lock. I have already been clear. Now, I know my front bench doesn't agree with me, but I have been clear on this, that we simply cannot afford the level of welfare payments that we are making. We need to be clear that health and pensions are now costing too much. We need to be clear that the security situation has changed. And I've heard the fact that we're now raising more on defence. But the reality is it's all in the never, never. I know the Army are now, even now, talking about cutting the number of soldiers in our Army. The Navy are talking about cutting the number of ships, and the Air Force talking about cutting the number of airports. I've heard that from friends who are serving today. So I look forward to seeing what he gets out of the budget round when he gets to it. Because the reality is, while our enemies are arming, we are talking. It is simply not serious. And my last point, if I may, is about technology. Because the reality is, for all that I've been talking about, there is one thing that is going so far against us that we're not even on the same field, and that's technology. Just look at the rise of AI across this world. Look at the only 2 countries that are serious players in it, the United States and China. The United States heading for the exquisite, China heading for the quotidian. What you're seeing is a radical change in the way that the economy is working. And here, what are we doing? Here, we're defending old jobs, we're punishing ideas, we're keeping back growth, and we've got a government that simply doesn't understand that we have only a few years before we can actually get back into the game. And if we miss it, then frankly, we're like that old Chinese empire where we have just completely missed the boat, we've burnt our ships, and the European expansion to the Americas replaced us.